So in this section, let's continue on with our BGP exercises. So now we have our BGP configurations being generated from templates. So we have our templates, we have our BGP variable data actually stored in inventory, and from that we can dynamically generate our output configurations. So something like the following. So we're generating our BGP output configs. Now let's actually push those configs to the relevant devices. So we go down here. We don't need this. Now I'm actually going to leave the assemble. Even though we only have one file that we're generating here, I'm going to actually leave the assembly process so you could easily see how you would add on other things if you had multiple templates that you were assembling from. In fact, we might even want to have decoupled our static routes from our BGP configuration and had those be in separate files, which we then assembled. But I'll leave the assembly process. So now notice we're going to use the configs, inventory host name, so pinet-router or pinet-switch5 or pinet-router1. We're then going to make a destination file, which is going to just be configs inventory hostname.txt. This is the file we're going to push in using Napalm. Go ahead and comment this out. Let's see, we have configs. We're pushing this same file that we generated. Right now we'll leave it to commit false, replace false because we're doing a merge operation and we're generating our diff. So let's go ahead and execute that playbook and see if we're able to generate our diff file for these two devices, the Cisco router and the Arista Pinet Switch 5. So there's our assembly process, generating that in this case, which is just a copy of the one file, the BGP configuration. Our name string is wrong here. Obviously, we're generating BGP configs. Now notice it tells us switch 5 is already correct because we configured that manually. Now it's waiting to perform this process on pinet-router 1, and in both cases our diffs were basically null. There were no changes for pinet-switch 5, and there were no changes for pinet-router 1. Okay, so now we have our configs basically being pushed. We would obviously have to toggle that commit. Now we already manually configured those because we used that to work out our syntax earlier on. But now that we have everything templatized and variabilized, let's start making a few modifications and see how that manifests itself on the remote devices. So let's go into host vars and let's add BGP to switch 6. So I'm in host vars, Pinet switch 6. I'm going to copy the Pinet switch 5 bgp.yaml file into here. So this will stay the same. RAS is 18. If we wanted to peer with 88.20, which is router 1, this would stay the same. Let's not announce the 2.2.2 route. Let's announce the 2.2.3 route, and that'll be a /24. So we update that there. That'll generate the configuration for Pinet switch 6, but we also need to generate the configuration for Pinet router 1. We need to add a new peer. So now we're going to have a peer IP, and this is going to be switch 6, which is at 33. We could manually log in and verify that if We were concerned that wasn't right, and we'll verify it in practice when we look at our BGP neighbors. Announced routes will be the same, and our static routes will be the same. The peer AS for this guy is going to be 18, and the maximum routes is NA in this case. Okay, so we go back in here. We now go into our playbook, and we are not going to run it against switch 5 router 1. We're going to add PyNet switch 6 into this, and let's see what happens when we do that. Once again, we haven't toggled that commit, so let's look at the diff that we get when we execute this. Okay, so generating the BGP config, we see it's been updated for router 1. Our assemble and switch 6, our assemble has been updated for router 1 and switch 6. I need to toggle this name string. Let me do that after this playbook execution finishes. Now it's waiting for PyNet router 1 for its diff to be complete. And its diff is complete. Let me go ahead and update that one name string. Okay, look at our diffs, particularly router 1. Okay, we're going to add that peer. And then we look at our diffs for PyNet switch 6. Alright, so here we clearly have a big problem for switch 6. And the issue, and this is an issue I sort of mentioned to you previously, is that we didn't clear out the files in this switch 6 directory. So if we look at here, we have our files from our previous video where we're generating the VLANs, we're generating the switch port configs, and we're generating the BGP config. So we didn't do anything to delete those files in our playbook. So when I executed that playbook, those items were still there. And so they're still coming across. Here's our VLAN config. Here's all the switch port config elements. Ultimately, we get to the BGP config. Here's our static route that we're adding. Here's our BGP config, our neighbor statement, and the network that we're going to announce. So you would definitely want in your playbook this automatic deletion of files. So in fact, let's go ahead and quickly add that in. So I'm going to look up Ansible copy module. And it might be the file module. I have to look at what's the logical module to use. Go down to the examples. Okay, so we'll look this up. Ansible delete files from directory. Okay, so now we have a reference example. Go ahead and copy that in. Go back into our playbook. Put this near the top. Now, one bad aspect of this, so you'd probably want to think about this more in practice, is this could potentially make your playbook not be idempotent. So you need to decide, is this the best way to do it? Is the best way to do it to always generate all my templates and then push that, which in practice, really that should be, the config should already be on the end device, so there shouldn't be any other changes. Now what's happened between now and when I ran that switchboard exercise is the config has been reset to the lab environment default, so those configurations that we pushed previously are no longer on that PyNet switch 6. So how would we do this if we were going to delete the files? So we'd add this file, playbook, remove files from configs directory, and then here I would say my path here is going to be the following. Get rid of the path that was specified here, include this. Now I don't like that this is actually going to delete the directory. So now I need to think about if there's a better way to do this solution. So let me see if we can work that out here. Going to add a tags to this. So we're going to move start.text from inventory hostname. Let's go ahead and see what happens when we do that. Let me make sure my path is correct. Configs, inventory hostname, everything start.text in there. Let me go back and look at examples of this and see what it says with state absent. Okay, so definitely some challenges there on what's the optimum way to do that, the remove. So you could definitely do something like the following. Remove the directory, re-add the directory. So that's basically a clean state. It's basically a clean state when it is done. And we're doing the inventory hostname directory in this case. Re-execute our playbook with the remove files. Remove files argument. Okay. So let's look at configs. Obviously our playbook failed, but we did remove those directories. So now we say state present on inventory hostname. Okay, so present isn't valid for this. I needed to say state equals directory. So here I go present, directory, go ahead and create that. Try again on our playbook execution. So now we've created each one of those. They're completely blank. So each time we execute our playbook, we're going to get completely fresh directory for these base ones. And then these files should be regenerated from our assembly option. Let's go ahead and rerun our full playbook. So we removed, and I should change the name. We're actually removing the configs directory in those two steps, and we're recreating it. Testing our connectivity, generating the BGP config, redoing our assembly, installing the BGP configuration, this is where we're generating the diff string. Wait for that to complete on PyNet router 1. We get that back. Let's look at switch 6. Okay, we're adding our null route. We're adding our BGP config. We're adding our peer. We're announcing this route. Let's look at router 1. We're just adding that peer. Let's go ahead and toggle our commit. So hopefully you can start to see in this, once you have this set up, it actually makes pushing incremental changes pretty easy to accomplish. Now, it took us work to get this set up, but once we got there, we're adding incremental changes easily. I'll go ahead and log in here. I'll go ahead and log in to Arista 6. Okay, so we're installing our BGP config. There's 6 is complete. Let's look at our BGP config. Let's look at where we're at this point on BGP state. Okay, so we're in the active state. It's got to push the config out to 88.20. It has pushed it out to 88.20. Okay, our BGP state came up to established. We've received two prefixes. Let's look at if we have those in the routing table. So right now we have a BGP peering session, eBGP, between both PyNet switch 6 and PyNet switch 5, and then they're peering to router 1. We don't have no iBGP between switch 6 and switch 5. We would have to configure that and get that set up. So at this point, we're missing that iBGP configuration. But we've completely pushed out this new config to switch 6 and set up peering to the router 1. Now in the next step of the process, we'd probably want to add some verification into our BGP to make sure that only those things we specified are there and nothing else is present. So that in this case, a good thing to think about would be, well, I could easily have additional neighbors specified that I didn't want. I could easily have additional prefixes being announced that I didn't want. So those are some things we should think about in the verification process.